Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Fontana. I'm with the Ohio Soybean Council, and we welcome you today to a virtual field tour of soybean planting in Ohio. The Ohio Soybean Council represents 24,000 soybean farmers in Ohio, and an important part of what soybean farmers believe in is educating our youth and providing teachers with the information they need to make the connection between science and agriculture in the classroom. We do this primarily through our education platform, Grow Next Gen, which was developed by our partners Education Projects. And with them, this website has been developed to provide all kinds of resources for teachers and students in the classroom, information, e-learning courses, curriculum, career information, and so on. But today we want to focus on planting soybeans and how that connects to you in the classroom. Our presenter today is Andy Stickel from Northwest Ohio. He will be talking to you today about planting of soybeans. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box, and we will try to answer as many questions as we possibly can. So with that, I will turn it over to Andy.
Thanks, Tom. Hey, welcome everyone. I'm glad to be with you guys today. As Tom said, my name is Andy Stickel. My farm is located here in Bowling Green, Ohio. So if you look at a map of Ohio, up in the northwest corner, you see it there, that red dot. We're about just about 20, 30 miles from Lake Erie and about 15, 20 miles south of Toledo on I-75. So give you an idea of where I'm from. I'm a fourth generation farmer here in Wood County, Ohio. I farm with my brother, my father, and our families. There's a picture of us there. I've got 5 children. It's not an updated family photo. We just had a little one here in January. But yeah, and so just to give you a little bit more information about our operation, we grow corn, soybeans, and wheat as row crops here in Wood County. And we're on a heavy lake bed soil, and as well as corn, soybeans, and wheat. A little bit of a diversification on our farm is that we grow processing tomatoes for a local cannery. And we've been doing that for quite a number of years. We also have a livestock. We have beef cattle, a feedlot that we feed several hundred head a year to be harvested for meat. And then we have about 40 brood cows that we breed and raise calves from to sell as well as local freezer meat. So a wide variety of things going on here on our operation. And we'll get into some more of those things here as we go. But as Tom said, any questions, we'll try to get to them all. And yeah, would welcome those. So planting here in Northwest Ohio is at a standstill today. So I'm not going to actually be able to plant anything, but I was able to get here on the end of a field that was dry enough to bring the planter and tractor out so that we could kind of see some of the things and some of the practices that we're doing and go from there. We did plant about 2 weeks ago. We put some soybeans in the ground, and a week ago we put some corn in the ground, which there are several folks around, several other farms around that have also planted some things as well, especially in Northwest Ohio. But for the most part, Ohio is actually a little bit behind the rest of the country in terms of planting progress than others. So yeah, but as we talk through the planter, we'll talk through some of the things that we've employed here on our farm to help us take advantage of some of the technology and things that is available to us today. So I'm going to flip this camera around here, and I'll give you a shot of what we're looking at here. So this particular farm, we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but this farm is actually this is corn stalks from last year, and it's got some rye growing. I'm going to hop out of the tractor here. We'll talk about planting. So our season here, our growing season in Northwest Ohio, which I know there's folks from all over the country on here, so maybe different in your respective state. But for us in Northwest Ohio, we typically start planting towards the middle to the end of April, and we go through the end of May. First part of June is typically when we like to plant our row crops. Our winter wheat is planted in the fall previously. But so that starts in should be planting now. We would ideally like to be in the field today, but we had about 1.5 inches of rain here on Sunday, so that's gonna keep us out for at least this week. It's a beautiful day here, as you guys can see, blue skies, a few clouds, breezy, about 55, 60 degrees. So a beautiful day, but really not that conducive for drying. Actually, we'd like a little more heat to help dry the soil out. And one of the things that we can't do up here in Northwest Ohio is plant when it's too wet. So, and the reason for that on our heavy lake bed soils is we're all systematically tiled up here. You guys can't see, you can see the road there, but out there by the road, there's a ditch that drains our land that helps take the water away. We were one time the Great Blank Swamp, but we can't plant because if we do, we can't plant when it's too wet because that creates a lot of compaction, especially on our heavy soils. And that compaction is seen for years. If we're in there too wet, we'll make tracks and ruts, and it really inhibits the plants to grow correctly, depletes the oxygen in the soil, and doesn't really allow either corn or soybeans, or any crop for that matter to really produce a lot. So this particular planter here, this planter plants both corn and soybeans. We actually used this planter to plant the soybeans a couple weeks ago. This is a 30-inch row planter. So when I talk about that, there's 30 inches between the rows, and many different planters have many different row configurations, but this one in particular is for 30-inch rows, so can plant corn or soybeans. So when we begin in the springtime, when we start procuring all the inputs for the year, whether that's seed and fertilizer and things, we have multiple different things going on. But these white boxes right here, you guys can see, is where the seed goes. So and in that box, we'll put about a bushel or so of seed. And we plant around, I think as I saw a question come in, how many seed plants per acre? So for soybeans, we typically like to plant around 140,000 seeds per acre. And you're going to say, well, what's the seed look like? So I've got a cup of seed here. And these little soybeans here are red in color. And they're about the size of the tip of a pencil eraser. And so we plant 140,000 of those per acre. And so so the question might come up, well, why are they red? Not all soybeans are red. So soybeans, before they're treated, so we put a treatment on these soybeans to help them grow. And several reasons we do that, but one of the reasons we do that is to help with seedling diseases. Some of you may have studied that in your classrooms. And those different seedling diseases can inhibit germination and growth to help that plant get a good healthy start coming out of the ground. Also helps with some insect pressure. One of the things that we employ on our farm is no-till and cover crops. And if you guys could see, when I popped out of the tractor there, you see this green cover crop growing here. That's rye. So when we treat seed, this all helps for some of those cooler, damp soils like we have right now. If we were planting, or a couple weeks ago, helps those seedlings get out of the ground. So these seeds are placed in these boxes when we're ready to plant. And just to give you a reference, this is what soybean seed looks like untreated. So, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. So, but the seeds are placed in pan up here. So in these boxes, and this is this row unit here. And what happens is this, as the seeds are placed in that box, you guys can see this meter right here. This meter works on a vacuum. So envision a vacuum cleaner in your house. And if you put a golf ball or a tennis ball over the end of that vacuum hose, that vacuum would hold that tennis ball in place. And it works the exact same way. So in that vacuum is a plate, and we'll show a video here in a second of how that plate picks up those seeds. But that vacuum holds that seed, and it drops those seeds down in between those two shiny discs there, and those are called the seed openers. As I'm moving through the field, they create a V trench, just like the letter V. That would be ideal, and those seeds drop down in that trench. And we usually plant soybeans on our farm about 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep. That gives them adequate moisture and depth with good soil cover. And so after the seeds fall down in that seed tube, they're counted by a monitor, which I'll show you in a second. And they come out between these two black wheels here. And those are the gauge wheels. And this handle here is adjust the depth. So if we have conditions that are too dry, we can put the seed lower or deeper in the ground to get to adequate moisture to help get it germinate. And the goal with planting is to create a good trench, lay the seed nice and gentle. If you guys can see down here, there's this little black thing with a blue hose sticking on it, and that's called a seed firmer. And that particular seed firmer pushes the seed down tight into the ground, but that seed firmer is actually also taking soil measurements. It's taking soil temp. It's telling me how much moisture is in the ground, and then that's doing that real time, how much organic matter is in the soil. And we can use those data points later on in our decision-making process in the winter and such. And so once that seed is placed in the ground, these two closing wheels here firm the soil around the seed, just like you would plant in your garden. For those of you that have had that experience of planting anything, you create a firm seed bed, you place the seed in the ground, you put some soil over top of it, firm it tight so that you have good seed to soil contact, and that plant, and it doesn't matter whether it's soybeans or corn or vegetables, has an opportunity to pull in moisture, to swell and to germinate and to get started as a plant. So a couple questions. How long have I been farming? So I'm the fourth generation. I started farming when I was very young. Grew up here on the farm. So and we farm about 1,500 acres here in Wood County. So here's a video of that planter working. You can see those individual seeds getting picked up and falling down the tube. You get a little bit of a close up. That meter is very close to what I have here on our farm. And one seed, and we space those out about in 30-inch rows. You would be about 2.5 to 1.75 to 2 inches between plants, and in 15-inch rows you'd be about 3 inches. So there could be a row in between. If you're looking at you can see my screen there. There'd be another row in between mine, and those would be about 3 inches apart. You want them nice and evenly spaced, but as those seeds come around, they drop, like I said, beneath the down in the ground and get firmed and planted. We plant about 4.5 to 5 mile an hour. And while we're planting, and it doesn't matter whether it's necessarily soybeans or corn, but we have the opportunity to place nutrients with the planter. So we'll talk about that here in a second as this graphic video finishes up here. So.
Andy, you want to head up into the cab and
Yep.
I'll ask a few questions we've gotten while you're doing that.
Okay.
If the seed boxes are full of soybeans, how many acres can you plant?
On this particular planter, about 40. 35 to 40. On some other planters can plant quite a few more than them. There's some newer planters out and that have central fill hoppers that hold a lot more seed at once. So I'm gonna hop up here in the cab. So one of the things I talked about, we plant about 4.5 to 5 mile an hour, and all the technology that we're using, just like in any other industry, and just like you guys, everybody with cell phone or iPad or computers. But you'll see in my cab here, I've got several different monitors. So up here in the top, I've got my iPad that collects all the data for me to take to the office or whatever I need to do with that, or to scout fields later in the summer. This particular monitor, this runs the planter. So this particular planter has a ton of technology on it. It's all electrically operated. There's no chains. And so that's one of the things that this particular planter does. Not all planters do that, but just some of the different technology that we're using, hydraulics and things to maintain depth. And then this particular monitor in here for the tractor. This tractor is equipped with auto steer. So one of the things that we like to do to make sure that we're obviously planting straight, but help reduce operator fatigue and just to create a lot of efficiencies, is use auto steer. So I'm going to show you guys how that works today. So I've already kind of set up the line here today. We use these lines over and over, and the heading is just simply a direction. So just like latitude and longitude, you pick a line and you set 2 points and you go on down through the field. So I'm going to kick the tractor in gear here, and I'm going to hit start right here. Hit accept. Got a couple warnings here. Okay. All right. Okay, so this particular line is set. If you guys can see all those lines. So I'm just going to retrieve the planters up out of the ground. We'll start driving. So I'm going to pan over here. And I've got a little auto steer button down here by my hand. You guys can't see, but you guys watch the wheels. So it's automatically pulling my tractor over to that line. So it's lining itself up, and it'll line itself up right between those rows as we're moving through the field. And this particular field's about 3/4 of a mile long. So when you're doing that, you got to make sure you pay attention from end to end. So, but that'll create a straight line, and go from there. So.
Thanks, Andy. Why don't we get into the life cycle of a soybean plant from planting to harvest? Yep. We do have a question. Okay. How long does it take for the plant to grow?
Yep. So our soybeans are, like I said, are planted typically around this time of year. So let's just call it the 1st of May, and we typically start harvesting the middle of September. So you guys can see the visuals there on the screen. Those seeds were planted; those are germinated. All right, and then the plants on your right side are they're in their second trifoliate. So the life cycle of a total soybean is about 5 months. And this particular visual here, so these soybeans are just freshly emerged. Those two little round buttons that you see on the side, those are called cotyledons. That's where those baby soybeans, if you will, get their energy from to grow. And then the one on your left has two little leaves starting to come out, and those will be its first set of trifoliates. And that's actually how you stage soybeans is how many trifoliates are there. So this particular, and then we usually flip this picture. This picture is probably about 2 to 3 weeks old. You can see the new growth coming out and all that. So, and then from then on, so soybeans are self-pollinators, and each pod, which produces the soybean, each pod has its own flower. So every pod that occurs on a soybean starts as a flower. And those small pods right there, that would be considered probably about R2. So it's in the reproductive stage. So vegetative stage happens up until R1 or so, when we first start to see some flowers on the lower part of the plant, and then then the stages of the soybeans progress on R2, R3 on up. So this particular plant may be in the R3 or R4 stage. Those pods are starting to fill, and from a time frame perspective, so in May, the germination maybe 7 to 10 days after would be maybe long, depending on the conditions. But this particular picture here with all those pods hanging on it, those pods are filling. So each of those pods has about 3 beans per pod. And then and some have 4, some have 2, just depends on the time frame. And then, or it depends on the moisture and the fertility and how good the soybeans are doing. And so that would typically be in early August. So we really would like to have ample rain, moisture, fertility. We want to make sure that plant has everything that it needs to produce as many beans as possible. This particular picture here would be in late August. And that's full canopy. Those beans are full of pods. And then so once soybeans begin to senesce and they reach maturity, they lose all their leaves. All the leaves and the branches fall off. The pods hang on there, and then we'll come through as the beans dry down at about 14.5% moisture, 14 to 15%, just depending on the year. Sometimes, and they may even be 11%, just depends on what kind of drying weather we get in the fall. And then as the combine will come through the field, it cuts the whole plant off. And as you can see here, so this combine is taking the whole plant in, and it thrashes the soybeans out of the pods, puts them in a tank up there in the combine, and then the soybeans are offloaded to a semi wagon, whatever the producer is using to haul those soybeans, into town. So, and here's a video of that soybean growing. You guys can see here, and the leaves start to fall off, turn yellow. Okay, so what do soybeans look like when they come out of the field? This bucket of soybeans that I'm holding here is actually taken right out of our grain bin yesterday, so we still have some beans in storage here on the farm. And so that's just to give you guys kind of an idea of what a finished soybean, what a mature dry soybean will look like. So, any other questions, Tom? Come in.
Sure. After you harvest the soybeans, what do you do with them?
Yep. So there's many uses for soybeans, and we're going to get into that in a minute here. But once the soybeans are loaded on a truck or wagon or whatnot, they go to an elevator. They have to usually be put in storage. So if you guys can see on my screen there off in the distance is our grain bin setup. So those grain bins, a couple of those still have soybeans in. So after harvest, we put our soybeans in the grain bin to store for the winter and then to sell later on. But lots of other folks may take them to a terminal or an end processor to be further processed for the uses. And as we talk about the uses here of soybeans have lots of different uses. Soybeans have kind of become are a staple in many several livestock diets. So here you see a picture of a pig. So soybeans are high in protein, 48% protein. Soybean meal is. It is used to help animals grow and develop lean muscle tissue that we can then harvest and eat as humans. So poultry, turkeys, chickens, aquaculture, lots of different feeds that lots of different animals consume. Beef cattle, we feed a little bit of soybean meal on our farm, depending on the stage of the cattle. But two of the big animal users are poultry and swine. Biodiesel, excuse me. So the oil is refined into biodiesel to use in our tractors, combines, buses, anything that runs on diesel can use biodiesel. Paints, oils and paints. So as the crushing process happens, you get meal, you get oil, and you get a hull, and the oil portion ends up in paints. Food service. Here we have pictures of some hand sanitizers. Been all too familiar with that over the past year, and lots of different plastics. The oil. Here's a couple pictures. So food. So human food as well as the use in animal diets, but tofu, veggie burgers, just different things that soybeans are used for, maybe even some soups, and just different things that humans can consume soy as well as a protein source. Styrofoam seats. I think we've got a picture of a synthetic turf. So those of you that are involved in athletics, there are tons of uses, further processes that allow soybeans to be used in your everyday lives. Asphalt, roofing. We actually use a product in our planter to help this meter run. It's called Dust. It's made all from soybeans. Crushed soybeans helps lubricate the meters and keep the seed flowing. So just a ton of uses of soybeans, for soybeans in our everyday lives. So, but the big ones are animal usage and animal feeds and biodiesel as well. So,
very good, Andy. Thank you. We have
yep.
some questions for you. You showed
Okay.
the treated soybeans
Yep.
earlier, the red soybeans. Mary James wants to know: does it modify the soybean genetically, or is it more of an external cover?
It's just an external cover. So the soybeans are not modified in any way, which we're going to talk about some GMOs and how they've affected our industry. But no, it's just an external cover that helps just helps ensure that the soybeans get up out of the ground to grow and to get off to a really, really good start. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about GMOs in a minute, but I'm going to go to a few more questions. Mary also asks how many seeds are in one bushel. You know, Andy?
In one bushel. Okay.
Yeah.
So now I don't know off the top of my head, but I can help you do the math quick. So let's just say there are typically 2,300 seeds per pound. Okay.
Right.
And there's 60 pounds in a bushel. So take 60 times 2,300, and that'll give you a rough estimate of how many seeds are in a bushel.
Thank you. Not a couple other questions. Can you talk a little bit about the inputs? By that,
Yep.
you've talked about putting seed in the ground. What about the use of fertilizers and pesticides?
Yep. So typical inputs on our particular farm. So some fertility that we use. So some we'll apply some nitrogen, potentially some phosphorus, some potassium, and so that's one input. So some fertility to make sure that those plants, even some sulfur. So we're using those nutrients to help make sure that those plants, as they're growing, have adequate and ample nutrition and fertility available to grow and produce a seed. So I'm just going to pan up here. So this particular planter has a tank on it. So when we planted some soybeans a couple weeks ago, we put some fertility down with that seed when we were planting. This planter does that with these knives right here on this planter. Puts it right next to the row. 2 inches away, 2 inches deep, so it goes in the soil in a band. We're extremely efficient. So that's one of the inputs that we use. Pesticides and herbicides. So you guys can see here, we also employ cover crops to help with weed suppression and disease suppression as well. So from a herbicide perspective, a couple different things that we're using to make sure that we keep our fields clean of weeds, excuse me. That don't rob any yield from us. And these cover crops help us do that as well. And finally, probably the last thing that we do in the fall, July, August timeframe, depending on the maturity of the soybeans, we apply a fungicide. And that helps with any leaf diseases, any plant diseases, depending on environmental conditions that may inhibit those soybeans from reaching full yield potential. So insecticides are used economic thresholds. We do not blanket apply any insecticides on our particular farm. This is the practice that we employ here. But if needed, we do maybe apply some insecticides.
Okay. I'm going to answer a few more questions and then we'll get into it. Someone asks about exporting soybeans, so I'll answer that one. Anywhere from 50 to 60% of soybeans grown in the U.S. and in Ohio are exported. A lot of the soybeans go down the Ohio River to the Mississippi River and out of the Port of New Orleans. Some go out to the Pacific Northwest or the West Coast and get shipped, and some go to the East Coast and get shipped. Some of the markets that get U.S. soybeans are China is a big importer, Mexico, Europe, Southeast Asia, all use a lot of U.S. soybeans. Uh, Andy mentioned earlier that soybeans are self-pollinating. Somebody asked, are bees needed to pollinate soybeans? They are not, but there is research going on where researchers at the Ohio State University are looking at the effect that pollinators may have on soybean yield. So it's possible that bees and other pollinators may increase yield. Andy, a question here. What is a good yield on soybeans in Ohio?
Yeah. So anywhere from 50 to 75, 80 bushel. There's folks out there that are growing 100 bushel soybeans, but soybean yield is very dependent on moisture and rain. And so, yeah, just really just depends on environmental conditions. So.
Yep, that's per acre, right, Andy?
Per acre. Yep, that's correct.
Yep. Okay. There are some questions. There's one here. I don't know if you can answer this. From Cynthia Dorsey, how much money did you spend on the farm?
I'm sorry, say that again, Tom.
How much money do you spend on your farm?
Oh boy.
You have an idea of what the equipment costs and seed costs
Yep.
and that kind of stuff.
Yep. So per acre on a soybean basis, you would expect to spend several $100s an acre, 50 to 60, maybe $50 an acre in seed, depending on your herbicide program and fungicide. I don't another $50 to $60, just depending on some of the inputs that you want to do. And that may include fertilizer as well. So 100 to 150 bucks, $150 may cover your inputs, but you also have living expenses for those of us trying to potentially make our living off the farm, and the equipment, land, just different things that all comes into play on the farm. So it's very operation specific, and yeah. So
just give them an idea, Andy. How much did your tractor cost, and how much did your planter cost?
Yep. So this tractor, probably new today, would be probably around 250,000, and the planter would be 120 to 140,000 probably. There's planters and tractors that cost way more than that, and there's some that cost way less than that. Depends on how much technology you want to employ. I know we talked about several things on the planter. But a lot of that is becoming maybe a little more standard in the industry today. Auto steer is very standard on a tractor, although not all tractors come with it. Just very operation specific on what those needs are.
How many people do you have working on your farm?
Yep. So day to day, it's my brother and I. My dad is semi-retired, and then during the summertime, even a couple of weeks from now, we'll have folks that we employ for several weeks to help us through planting and harvesting in the fall. We have several others as well. And so just every day, just the two of us, but our families chip in, my wife, my kids, brother's wife, everybody contributes and differently and different times of the year.
Okay, now we'll get into the GMO discussion a little bit. Question from Cynthia: are the soybeans you plant genetically modified?
So actually, on our farm, we do not plant genetically modified soybeans. We plant what's called non-GMO. So GMO stands for genetically modified organism. There's been, and we'll talk through some of this, but we've taken a specific gene or whatnot, and we've modified that so that it is so that something like a herbicide or an insect may be resistant. So the big one is the big one that really started the no-till kind of revolution in the early 90s, if you will. Roundup ready soybeans. Now we have all sorts of herbicides and beans that are GMO or genetically modified to be able to use other herbicides on them from a weed perspective. And so, as you can see some of the stats here, 20 years, GMOs have reduced pesticide applications by 8%. Our yields have increased dramatically. And then that goes back to the breeding. That goes back to the germplasm that we're using. We are extremely efficient in agriculture. We're getting more yield, more pounds per acre than we were 20 and 30 years ago on less inputs. No-till, cover crops, different techniques have been strip till. Different techniques are employed on many different farms that allow us to help improve our soil moisture, help increase our organic matters in our soil. We're keeping our soil in place so that when we get big wind and rain events, that our soils are staying in place. And so GMOs have played a critical role in that because they've allowed us to employ those techniques without doing a lot of full width tillage. So myth: farmers soak and douse drench their GM crops with pesticides. That is far from the truth. We do not. We want to keep our costs as low as possible. So whether that's with fertility, with fertilizer, or that's with pesticides, insecticides, herbicides, we are not using any more than is necessary, and we're not even using them at that. So, like I said, on our farm, we're growing non-GMO food grade soybeans. So our soybeans end up at a processor that crushes these soybeans and uses them for human food. But majority of the soybeans produced in the U.S. and around the world end up in animal feeds, biodiesel is some of the uses that we talked about earlier. So our beans are no better than anybody else. They're just for a different use. And that's the beauty of agriculture and farming. There's lots of different choices, lots of different decisions, be no different than organics, and different opportunities for different producers to employ different practices on their farm that make sense for them.
Okay. Another question from Mary. Mary has lots of good questions. Can you genetically modify the soybean to grow more beans in a single pod? I mean, I can try to answer that. I'm sure that has been looked at a lot. Andy mentioned that usually you get about 3 beans per pod, but sometimes 2 and sometimes 4. So I don't know, Andy, do you know of any breeders who've developed 4 bean pod soybeans? I'm not aware that they're
Well, I don't know of any particular breeding, but one of the things that has come with genetically, and it doesn't actually matter whether it's non-GMO soybeans or GM soybeans, we are selecting the best varieties and hybrids that we can use on our farm. So if we have a soybean out here that we grow on our farm that we see in the fall has way more 4 bean pods, has way more yield than another variety, we're going to use that. We're going to buy seed for that variety more so than the other variety potentially in another year. But maybe one variety works better on a different piece of ground. So it's very specific. Soybean yield is very, very dependent on the weather. So as I mentioned earlier, when we were talking about growth stages, August, early August, middle of August, one of the things that soybeans do are they're very stress and drought tolerant. So a soybean plant can kind of shut down. Soybeans love sunlight. That's why you want to plant them early. You get them up out of the ground. They absorb all that sunlight, photosynthesis, and they soak up that sunlight. But if it gets hot and dry, they kind of just shut down. And they only put on as many pods as what they can, is what they can produce, right? So then if a rain comes along in August and it has ample fertility and heat and moisture, those plants will put more pods on, which increases your yield. And so the 3 and 4 bean pod really comes from the opportunity to have ample moisture during that time and to fill those pods. You can have a 4 bean pod with only 3 beans in it. It's very dependent on the weather.
Okay, thanks very much. Somebody was asking about if students are interested in farming, how can they get some experience in that? Are there ways that they could work on the farm in the summer that you're aware of?
Yep. There are. So we employ folks from time to time on our particular farm, just doing different things. I know there's plenty of opportunities out there for farmers looking for folks that want to work every day and get some experience doing that. There's even some farms that offer internships. One of the things that there's plenty of opportunities. You just got to kind of keep your eyes and ears open, or even approach if you're interested in that. Approach a local farmer if you know somebody, or somebody within your community can maybe get you in contact. So.
Very good. We have one here from Harrison via Mary James. I own a 1974 International and was wondering what it could be used for.
I'm not sure on that. So I'm not sure. One of the things, though, I didn't touch on was all the different occupations and different professions that I come in contact with on a daily basis. So this morning already, I've had 2 different conversations with a person that helps me with risk management, a person that helps me sell soybeans or corn or wheat. I've talked to them. I talked to an agronomist already today. Banking, product tech support, all the electronics. You guys can see in the background here. When we updates from software, folks, there's a ton of occupations that are related to agriculture. It's not just me here on the farm. It's the folks in the crushing facilities, logistics, the truck drivers, the further processing folks down the way, engineers that design the tractor, the technology, the planner. There's tons and tons of opportunities to become involved in agriculture, both directly and indirectly. There's folks that make the cylinders, that run the planter, just a ton of different things and ways for occupations and for folks and young people such as yourself to become involved in agriculture.
That's great, Andy. Thanks for bringing that up. Just as we wrap up here, I want to say that soybeans are the #1 crop grown in Ohio. 4.5 to 5 million acres of soybeans every year, 250 million to 300 million bushels of soybeans produced in Ohio every year. Agriculture is the #1 food, and agriculture is the #1 industry in Ohio, well over $100 billion a year. Soybeans themselves, depending on the price, this year probably more, but $2.5 to $5 billion is the worth of the crop. So agriculture is very important to the state. I want to thank everybody for participating today. We appreciate it. Please go to grownextgen.org for all kinds of resources for teachers and students in the classroom. As I mentioned earlier, soybean farmers have invested a lot in education. We think connecting teachers and students to agriculture in the science classroom is very important. I want to thank Andy Stickel from Wood County, our soybean farmer who took you through planting and talked about many other issues associated with soybean. Andy, great job. And with that, I hope everybody has a good afternoon and a good